G'day guys, how's it going? I'm Whitnall. This is ACWSport, and the transfer window for summer 2017 has officially shut. That's right, all of the markets now are closed, and that is why I didn't do this video a few days earlier, because I always like to give it a couple of days after the Premier League window is shut. It allows for the other markets to close properly, and it also allows for any deals that may not have been reported on the night of transfer deadline day to also be reported on. So now that we know who is going to be playing for who this season, up until January at least, it's time to review the summer 2017 transfer window. Starting off with the fee. They actually reckon the overall spend of the transfer market was around £1.4 billion, which is absolutely ridiculous. It is a new record. The numbers keep rising every single year, and it's just because there is so much money in the game because of the broadcasting. Where this is going to end and whether or not we'll ever see things like wage caps and transfer caps come into play, I'm honestly not sure. But as we saw with the Neymar deal expanding on around £200 million, you look at Kylian Mbappe for around £166 million as well, both of them to PSG. That's in a foreign market, obviously not the Premier League one. But you can see that there really is no limit to how much some of these clubs, some of these multi-billionaires that own some of these clubs are willing to spend on players. But I want to focus purely on the Premier League. And like I said, the total spend was £1.4 billion. When you look at what clubs spent what, there are actually 4 clubs that exceeded £100 million in spending. And those clubs, starting off at number 1, were Manchester City. They spent in total £221.6 million on players, mainly on fullbacks. But Pep feels like he's got the players in that he needs. Chelsea spent around £190 million. Everton actually came in at 3rd, spending £150.6 million, and then Manchester United came in 4th spot at around £145.75 million. So they were the 4 major clubs that spent over £100 million. Now, obviously, if you're including Liverpool's deal for Keita, that would carry Liverpool into the £100 million bracket as well. But because he joins next summer, and that's when the deal officially goes through, that's why I'm not including Liverpool in the over £100 million spenders. So those were the only 4 clubs that actually spent over £100 million. The team that spent the least was Stoke City. And in comparison to Manchester City, Stoke spent around £25 million on players. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because they got some coups in, and I think Stoke will have another solid season. They've brought in some Premier League proven players like Darren Fletcher, for example, and brought in some exciting players, even if they are just on loan for now, like Hesse. So I think Stoke could have an exciting season ahead. And it's not necessarily about how much you spend, it's about the quality that you buy. And I think that's clear when you look at some of the buys that have happened around the world this summer. Now, there are actually 4 clubs, when it came to letting players go, that didn't actually make any money whatsoever. And those 4 clubs were Bournemouth, Brighton, Crystal Palace and West Brom. They didn't actually make any money for any players that they wanted to let go whatsoever. They purely brought players in and spent. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes you do just need to let players go. It could be the end of a player's contract, or you just decide that that player's not necessarily good enough for you guys anymore. You're not fussed about making any money for him, or it could be that they've loaned players out as well. So those 4 clubs didn't actually make any money, but there were additional 3 teams that didn't actually break the £10 million mark, and they were Manchester United, surprisingly, only making around £8-9 million for sales. Watford, who made around £5.5 million, and also Huddersfield, who made around £5 million as well. So 7 clubs there that didn't make over £10 million in sales. But like I said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And of course, if Wayne Rooney hadn't gone to Everton as part of the Lukaku deal, then obviously he would have definitely gone for more than £10 million. But there you go, just shows. In terms of clubs that actually made decent amounts of money on players sold, Chelsea topped that, making around £104 million on players sold. And that's obviously with the transfers of players like Matic, who's gone, for example. When you look at what clubs spent the highest amount per average on a player, as you would imagine, with Manchester City spending the most on players in the summer, it is them. The average amount that they spent on a player was around £44.32 million this transfer window. In equivalent to that, the team that spent the least amount on average per player was Huddersfield. They spent around £3.35 million. Obviously, the biggest deal of the summer was Romelu Lukaku going from Everton to Manchester United for £90 million plus Wayne Rooney. Well, there's a bit of debate as to whether or not it is plus Wayne Rooney or Wayne Rooney just left on a free transfer. But I'm going to go with the fact Rooney was included in the deal. That's what I think was happened. So yeah, Lukaku was the biggest transfer of the window at around £90 million. But obviously, if you include the Rooney, it's well over £100 million there. And when you actually look at what that total amount was spent on, in terms of the £1.4 billion in the Premier League alone, don't forget we're not looking at other markets and who certain teams bought. I know I obviously mentioned PSG because they were the 2 outstanding kind of transfers of the summer, but we could go on to all kinds of different figures But the money, the £1.4 billion that was spent, was actually spent on around 15 goalkeepers that were signed for different Premier League clubs at a total spend of around £76.9 million. 11 right-backs at a cost of around £136.5 million. Most of that was Manchester City, as we know. Centre-halves, 22 centre-halves were signed at a combined total of around £257.2 million. There were 10 left-backs signed for £83.5 million. Right-wingers, there were 7 signed for £108.4 million. Central midfielders, 24 central midfielders signed for £269.4 million. 7 left-wingers signed for £55.9 million. When you look at attacking midfielders, there were 9 signed for £67.8 million. And then finally, strikers, there were 24 strikers signed for Premier League teams this transfer window at a total of £333.4 million. So they're just some of the ridiculous figures that sum up the 2017 summer transfer window. What was your favourite transfer of the window? That's what I want to know. When you look at the deals, who do you think was the best deal? Do you think that Watford signing of Chalobah, for example, from Chelsea for around £5 million is an absolute bargain when you consider that he's an England international? What about Javi Hernandez to West Ham for £16 million? When you look at the amount that other clubs spent on other strikers, this is a Premier League proven striker, and we've seen that in his start to the season as well, even though West Ham haven't necessarily made the best start. So let me know in terms of facts, figures, and who you think in terms of the overall transfers was the best deal, who got the best money for signings, and who you're really excited about seeing play for each club. Now, in terms of who had the best window, obviously that's debatable, depends on who you're looking at, and obviously where the teams end towards the end of the season. You definitely say that, going by the first few games of the season, Manchester United were very, very effective in the transfer window, bringing in their players early. They got the targets they wanted, pretty much, and we've seen that in the way in which they're playing at the moment because they've started so well. However, just because you bring in the targets that you want doesn't mean you're going to have a great start to the season, and we can see that in West Ham, because even though they've brought in great Premier League experience in Hernandez, in Zabaleta and Joe Hart, for example, they're rock bottom of the Premier League at the moment. Obviously, in terms of transfers and who might be a bit disappointed, you could say that Chelsea might be disappointed, even though I do think they've strengthened their squad, because so many players decided not to go to them. There's 7 key players, if you include Oxlade-Chamberlain, Llorente, look at Rafinha, Alexandro. These are all players, just for example, I know I didn't cover all 7 there, but there are 4 of them that decided not to go to Chelsea and decided to play their football elsewhere. So there have been some rather odd decisions made, you'd think, by players, but at the same time, you could also say that Chelsea, when you look at the players that they've let go, either out on loan or players that they've sold, like Chalobah, for example, should they have given those players more time? Obviously, we know that Arsenal have had major problems this window. They've held on to Alexis Sanchez. Some people may see that as a good thing for Arsenal. Personally, I think the fact that you're letting go the opportunity to get in £60 million plus get rid of his wage is a bit of a silly decision when next summer, unless he signs a new contract, which I personally don't think he'll do, he'll walk for free to one of your main rivals. I don't think it's good business. I think Wenger needs to, Arsenal as a club really, need to seriously look at how they're going about their transfer business, because they haven't delivered on what they promised the fans, which was to bring in some massive names. I know they brought in Lacazette, but when you look at the players that, are arguably going to be walking out on a free contract next summer, in the likes of Ozil, Alexis, Sanchez, and obviously they sold Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think there's a lot of worries there for Arsenal. But yeah, that's pretty much what I made of the transfer window in terms of crazy stats that have come away from it, in terms of who I think made the best deals and that. But I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. So please comment below. Let me know what you thought of the 2017 transfer window, and I will see you guys again soon. And please, of course, don't forget to subscribe to ACW Sport.